and they said there is no animals anywhere to be seen. There's like no birds chirping, no rabbits, even cats and dogs, because the people are starving and they're eating everything. Hey guys, Kapper here. If you're curious at all about the effects of the panic of the virus as it relates to country living, then join me for a few minutes. I'm going to walk around our property and I'm going to show you some very advantageous things of living out in the country and managing your property. So let's get started and let's go take a walk. So right now I'm standing basically on the edge of a cedar thicket. We have a very large cedar thicket on our property. It's probably about 20 acres. And when I initially had the biologists over on our property, and even all of our neighbors, the biologists want you to cut down these kind of thickets and try to restore natural hardwood regeneration. But to me, the problem with that is all of the wildlife lives in the cedar thickets, predominantly. I mean, it's evident to me every single day. When you go walking in the cedar thickets, you're kicking out rabbits, you're always kicking out deer, and you see all kinds of other wildlife. I mean, when deer get shot, they go into the thick, nasty cover like cedar thickets because they know they are safer from humans. Every time we drive in our driveway, we see deer. And where do they go? They jump right in the cedar thicket. So we are purposefully keeping that cedar thicket, even though it's called a native invasive. It's got autumn olives, it's got all kinds of brush and red cedars. But the animals feel safe in there, so that's why we keep the thicket and we don't cut it all down and just leave the oaks and the hardwoods. So in the background you could see a watering hole that's deep in the woods. I enjoy digging the watering holes, but it's not just for fun. First of all, I complement them with food plots for the wildlife, but every single watering hole, I think I've got like 8 maybe right now, they are all loaded with frogs. There's turtles around them, snakes, and wood ducks hang out in these watering holes. So you got frogs, snakes, and turtles. Those all could be very valuable food sources in real times of crisis and emergencies. Not to mention, you have a water source. I mean, we do have a water purifier so that if we did have a real emergency, we could take the water from all of our ponds and that we could purify it. And water might become a bartering tool in such an emergency. So having good water supply is valuable for a lot of those reasons when it comes to survival and staying away from the panic. So behind me you could see one of my food plots. I enjoy doing food plots, it's my passion, but there again, we always have deer on our property, lots of deer, all through the year. Right now it's the worst time of year, winter, and you see it's mowed down like a carpet. There's always deer and rabbits in our food plots. So there again, I mean, a deer, if you could store it properly, even if you don't have electricity, that could feed you for a month or 2 months. So the food plots also have more advantages than just hunting, hunting is for pleasure, but it could be for reality in these kind of crises like this. So we keep the food plots going for deer. These things can all be bartering tools. I mean, you might need a couple of horses for transportation if the infrastructure is all the way down. I mean, you might need cattle, you might want some meat. So there's a lot of different advantages to having wildlife resources on your property. And I mean, of course, I'm talking about chaos here, but this is a perfect example. You go into grocery stores and in the cities, that is, and everything's empty. I went into our local grocery store just yesterday or the day before in a really small town, and the toilet paper aisle was stocked full. Everything was stocked. Canned food, it was just like normal because we don't have the giant populations of the cities. So there again, it's just another example of the difference between country living and city living when it comes to major crisis like this, or even just major panic. So take the two ponds, for example. They're not just pretty, but they're very, very useful. This pond over here was existing when we bought the property, and we added this one. Yes, they're very pretty and nice, but both of these ponds are stocked with fish. I mean, they're loaded with bass, catfish, and bluegill. Those are all food sources. In addition to that, it draws all kinds of wildlife. Matter of fact, when I just walked out here, I kicked up 4 wood ducks and 2 geese. I have a shotgun, although for fishing, Mrs. Kapper might have to be the one feeding me because she seems to be a little bit better at fishing.
Okay, so this is the boat channel, and hold still, honey. This is who I got there. Ooh, look at them ruby lips. All right, there he is. Nice. Here's my foot, which is about size 9.
It also draws wildlife like raccoons, opossums, rabbits, and other critters that can be food sources if need be. So let's keep moving on. Hey guys, Kapper here, and one quick note as far as the virus itself. Mrs. Kapper works at a hospital. Matter of fact, she has to travel between many hospitals. So there's probably a better than average chance that she may bring that home to us someday. But even still, all the things that we do and we practice every day out here in the country will definitely be beneficial, even if she does bring it home to us and we do have to be quarantined. So hopefully that's not the case, but let's keep moving on. Thanks. Fruit trees, apple trees. We plant these all over our property. Yes, initially they're for wildlife and for deer and other critters, but they're a food source. Granted, they have their season, but when we get enough of these built up and they all start growing, that'll be another food source, another commodity. Again, you might need to trade it or need it for survival, but it's just one more layer to the land management and country lifestyle. The woods themselves, valuable resources. Our woods are loaded with squirrels, rabbits, raccoons, deer, and the wood might be a commodity. Like I said, if you have a long-term thing, you may need to cut down some wood for barter, for trade, to help people build buildings or whatever. I don't particularly like squirrel meat, but hey, in an emergency, put some salt and pepper in there and it'll work in a pinch. Water traps like this. It's not just the erosion control, but I've captured all the runoff here and I'm piping it into the pond. So at the other end of this pipe is basically rainwater, fresh rainwater. It's filtered through the grass all the way down this hill. If you really needed it, you could sit down on the other end with 5-gallon pails and be getting rainwater. Same thing with your gutters. You could make a rain collection system and you could have basically potable water without even having to filter it, if you can somehow collect the rainwater. Privacy. Obviously, we strove for privacy, but in times of crisis, where do you see all the violence going on? You know, it's in the big metropolitan areas. You know, when they're looting stores and burning people's houses down and killing people with rocks and sticks and guns. You don't see a whole lot of that in the country, and most people in the country have many ways of defending their home and their land, but it's just sheer numbers. You know, all the people are concentrated in areas, and when things start getting bad, it's just common sense there. But we enjoy our privacy, but it's also a safety factor for us as well. What about all of this stuff back here? Gravel, riprap, cedar trees, more gravel. Again, if everything is shut down and you need to fix your own property or some bartering where you could trade things for food, having this stuff on hand could be a valuable asset. What about equipment? Most people don't think of that, but in times of crisis, A tractor, I mean, you could dig watering holes, you could be planting corn, you could be fixing other people's driveways, bartering, that kind of stuff. Equipment could be very valuable in some serious crisis time as far as bartering and being able to do things on your own property. Open fields, a lot of options with open fields. Right now we use them for wildlife, but we could start planting corn, beans for our own consumption. Big gardens. If we need animals, I'd say horses might be a good investment someday, because you can actually use them for transportation also. You know, speaking of fields, I watched a video of someone that recently came back from Venezuela, and they said there is no animals anywhere to be seen. There's like no birds chirping, no rabbits, even cats and dogs, because the people are starving and they're eating everything. That's a scary proposition, but that's real in other places. So fingers crossed for us that we don't ever have to experience that. But we do have resources to help should it happen. You know, especially with specialty machines. I mean, if chaos was getting real bad, people might want me to come over and make them, big rock borders so vehicles can't penetrate their property. Another good bartering tool. Just a lot to think about that people don't often consider with country living. One other thing with having field space for contingency plans, if you want to start raising pigs, chicken, cattle, goats, whatever, you at least have the space to get started on those things as a contingency plan. Communications. I have several ham radios all set up, functioning for more communication should everything be shut down. Having a home that's either self-sustainable or almost self-sustainable. A lot of country folks still burn wood for heat. When we built this home, I paid a lot extra for the heavier foam insulation. So we chose to go with LP as a backup. We do have a generator, so if the power grid were to go down, this home could survive. I just fire the generator up for an hour at a time to heat it. That would be enough to heat it or cool it for a day. As far as fuel goes, I chose LP because it doesn't have a shelf life. You can get a 1,000-gallon tank and it doesn't have an expiration, like gasoline and diesel fuel. So another thing to consider, if you're on LP versus natural gas, you're not as reliant. So that's something else to consider if you're living in the city and you're totally reliant on utilities. Just something to consider. That's all I'm saying, and you may see some panic. Hopefully you don't, but it's just another thing to consider. I mean, even this boat, granted we don't use it as much as I would like, but as long as there's fuel available, you could be out duck hunting or hunting critters in rivers and marshes to bring home meat. Honestly, meat is all you really, really need. I mean, I've been on this keto diet for a while now, and that's all it is meat and fat, basically. And actually, things are going pretty good. So I appreciate you joining us. Just some things to consider. Maybe once this coronavirus passes, you might see some things if you live in the city that are kind of disturbing, and you might think twice about moving to a more rural area. So thanks a lot. I'll catch you on the next go around, and best wishes to everyone who actually gets exposed or knows somebody that's exposed. I hope this passes really quickly. So thanks a lot. We'll see you on the next go around here at Kapper Outdoors.